I want to welcome you all here today. My name is Steve Zeltzer, and I'm a member of the Pacific Media Workers Guild in San Francisco, rank and file member, a journalist. I also produce Work Week on KPOO San Francisco. It's the only Bay Area labor program that's broadcast on the air. And I'm a producer of Pacifica program, Capitalism, Race, and Democracy. And I'm also a supporter of the United Front Committee for a Labor Party, which is a national organization supporting the development of a mass labor party, the United States Mass Democratic Labor Party. So the meeting today is about the issue of fascism, ICE, and the crisis in the United States and internationally, and why working people in this country need a general strike. So that's what we're going to be focusing on and talking about. And our first speaker is Abel Mouton, and he's with the UAW lawyers here. And actually, their local had the first action supporting the idea of a general strike in the United States that I know about. So this is pretty historic, actually, that an action was taken by workers and their union to support the idea of a general strike. It wasn't covered by the media, wasn't covered by the corporate press, but it happened, and I think this is a action that should be replicated by other workers and unions around the country.
So my name is Abel Mouton. I've lived in San Francisco since 1994. I'm a member of Socialists Without Borders. We consider ourselves to be a project in the tradition of revolutionary Marxism. I'm also a member of the National Organization of Legal Service Workers, which is basically attorneys and paralegals who do legal services in the United States. It is a national local of the United Auto Workers. So our local has shops all over the country. And specifically, I'm an attorney who works at legal assistance to the elderly in the housing department. So my job is to defend seniors who are facing eviction. And it keeps me pretty busy in this town. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is the kind of, I didn't quite get all the way to the end of organizing this talk. We'll see how long it ends up being and how much I'm really able to cover. But I'm going to start by talking about the definition of the general strike and why it's appropriate to this political situation and what some of the obstacles are. And then I'm going to talk some about the experience that we had organizing the action that we just did on October 24th and talk about some of the important lessons that we learned along the way. The definition of general strike, and I got this off of the Google AI, is that a general strike is when a wide range of workers from many or all industries in a community, in a region, or in a country stop work to disrupt the economy and create severe hardship in the interest of making the authorities or their bosses make significant economic, political, or social concessions. An important feature of a general strike would be that it was organized around a common goal. So people wouldn't be out on a general strike for every issue they could think of. They would typically be out on the strike for a small range of issues. Historically, they start in one industry and they spread from there based on the reaction of the authorities to the strike, which is often violent, and it kind of stands as, or historically it has stood for a symbol of collective workers' power. They are also illegal in the United States since 1947, since the Taft-Hartley Act. Now, it doesn't specifically say that you can't do a general strike, but the things that it does outlaw makes it so that the general strike is effectively illegal in the United States. For instance, the Taft-Hartley Act means you can't do solidarity strikes with other unions. So if one union goes out, if a union in a social work agency went out, I couldn't take my legal service workers agency out to be in support of those workers organizing. That would be a federal crime. I also couldn't call for a secondary boycott. I couldn't say that we're not going to use the products from this other company because they do these things. That means the Taft-Hartley is pretty intense and pretty comprehensive, but those are the parts that are most relevant to the discussion of the general strike. But over generations of this being the fact, over generations of this being the status quo in the United States, the general strike is mostly just thought of as like a really big protest these days. I don't know if you've noticed, but the world is facing many big problems, economic, socially, and politically. The biggest one that's always percolating in the background, but maybe too big to be interesting, is climate change that is basically going to destroy Earth as human habitat. You know, it is debated how long that's actually going to take, but I don't think it's unreasonable to say that we're looking at near-term complete social collapse on Earth due to climate change. And it's already very much in our face all day, every day, with the increase in food prices, with the increase in repression, with the big weather events taking place in more and more wider parts of the world. But it also seems almost like too big to be interesting, like too big for people to really commit to doing it. I mean, even Bill Gates, who is like Mr. Climate Change now, says actually we probably shouldn't be focusing on emissions so much. We should be focusing on the things that my foundation already focuses on. Another major social problem that we face is an increase in income inequality throughout the United States now, or throughout the entire planet. And now a very small number of extremely rich people control most of the money in the world, and all the rest of us are kind of scrambling for crumbs underneath that. And in the interest of preserving that situation, the political systems are becoming more and more repressive everywhere. Then this also comes along with a continuous re-entrenchment of imperialism. Like one of the features of capitalism is it's kind of requires having something to develop. So now they're in the habit of just destroying things and killing a whole bunch of people so they can pay themselves to rebuild it and profit that way. This is a really good. This is one of the many motivations behind the slaughter that we've seen in Gaza over the last couple of years, is the idea of just completely razing Gaza to the ground, driving as many Palestinians out of the area as they can, if they can actually kill them, which is almost certainly many multiples of the number that they're actually reporting in the press. I think probably it's closer to 250 to 300,000 people that have been killed in that conflict. And then rebuild it as beachfront property. And it's made clear that this is an intention behind that. Imperialist retrenchment also is part of what explains the the courageous actions of the U.S. Navy to destroy fishing boats in the Gulf of Mexico and in the Pacific coast. These are very small boats, but they've been declared, anyone who is producing drugs, any country that's producing drugs, has been declared an enemy combatant, and therefore fair game for U.S. military operation. And they're destroying these very small fishing boats that would require a lot of energy and a lot of stops to get to the United States before they inflicted the very small amounts of fentanyl that they could potentially be carrying on those boats on our population. It's definitely their fault, the opioid epidemic. I'm being sarcastic if you can't tell. But this process is escalating. There was that big thing where they have now sent the biggest, most advanced aircraft carrier in the history of aircraft carriers to menace the fishing industry of Venezuela on the off chance that fentanyl might come to the United States. And then the United States also shows interest in territorial expansion. And we're in that, President Trump is such a clown. Many of us are in the habit of laughing off the things that he says. So when he talks about invading Canada and annexing Canada, people think that he's joking. When he talks about buying Greenland, people think that he's joking, and it doesn't quite happen. Hasn't quite happened yet. When he talks about taking back the Panama Canal because the Panamanians aren't using it correctly, Like, these are all goofy things from a certain point of view, but also I think it reflects a real strategy of expanding the United States in preparedness for what the world's going to look like after climate change, or what's going to be happening in the world as climate change develops. Trump administration is also savaging governmental institutions. Many of the gains of the Great Society and the New Deal are now all on the chopping block. If it's the Department of Education, if it's the Environmental Protection Agency, if it's OSHA, Social Security, food stamps, the government now says that it hurts the government more to give people money to buy food than it hurts the people who can't put food on their table. Like, that is an actual legal argument that the government raised for not paying people's food stamps. It's an outrageous situation. There's so many important things that they've done terrible that it's hard for me to remember them all. Another very important one is issues around health care. They're taking away what little access to health care that we have is about to become a lot more difficult. And this is especially in the case of women. The women's right to abortion was one of the first things that left with the Supreme Court that Donald Trump packed with people who would be loyal to him. So, these are huge political issues, very bad things that we have had to have huge protests about against, and they were all run pretty much by the Democratic Party, and mostly they end up in some general, very catch-all kind of, with some general catch-all type politics, excluding anything that they might imagine to be too fringe, but also trying to make it just as general and as palatable, like. This is what I think of when I hear the demand, no kings, because it almost like it reframes all of these major social issues that are causing so much harm all over the world as just Donald Trump has too much power. That's the real problem here. As though this hasn't been a bipartisan program for generations to put as much power in the presidency as they possibly could. As if the problem was that the president that we have might stay when this is a process that has taken place over generations with presidents of both parties. And that all of these other issues boil down to this one problem. The democratic process in the United States has become so narrow and so corrupt that even the Democratic Party is having trouble accessing power. That's how they want to frame these big protests, and a lot of the social ills that they're meant to address continue. But the other thing, objectively, if we're analyzing things a little bit more objectively, we can say that maybe we need something bigger than a protest, maybe something more like a wide range of workers in many or all industries in a region or country stopping work to disrupt the economy and inflict sufficient hardship to pressure the authorities into making significant economic, political, and social concessions, like perhaps the general strike might be an option. But another thing about a general strike is that it brings about a situation where the government just isn't really in power in the same way anymore. This is why it's illegal. This is why the Democratic Party continues to rigidly control the official leadership of unions and treat the left and people who would call for a stronger labor action to address social ills, well, it treats us like we're cockroaches and we're lucky that they aren't stepping on us most of the time. And they're laughing at us behind their sleeves, talking about how the general strike is unrealistic and how it can never happen because despite all the organizing that it would take, never taking responsibility for the fact that they're the ones who are supposed to organize the unions. They would take so much organizing that it can't happen, and it's against the law. So these are kind of the it's a major hurdle to the notion of organizing a coordinated labor action of this kind. But it doesn't change the fact that as a tactic for addressing the social problems that we really face right now, these huge existential social problems that we're facing, that we're running out of time to address. If we don't address them in the next generation or maybe two, we're going to be talking about a very different social situation in this world. It remains the appropriate tactic for addressing this. It remains the appropriate it's the only thing of a size that could address climate change, that would actually stop work and make people think seriously. And incidentally, the United Nations even calls for this. The United Nations says, if you don't change everything in 180 degree right now, then climate change will kill us all. No, they don't say that, but that's what they imply. But incidentally, the appropriateness of this tactic of the general strike is making it more resonant, and it's starting to come up. And so this is what I see when I see Mayor Johnson and President Nelson of the AFA-CWA take up the call for a general strike. They're seeing that it's appropriate. They're seeing that people are becoming aware of it. They're seeing people want to start talking about it as a thing that we actually might do. And they're stepping up to kind of keep that tactic within the Democratic Party arsenal, and therefore kind of keep it under control and maybe turn it into a protest for no kings, something like that. Somehow utilize this type of activity to bolster its own power, which is kind of the role that the Democratic Party has played in the bipartisan system for generations and continues to play. So as a member of Socialists Without Borders, the discussion of a general, how much time am I doing on time? Okay. The discussion of a general strike has been part of our program, so to speak, and part of our interaction with society on political issues. We regularly publish literature saying, and what we really need right now is a general strike. And at first we felt like we were really, on the edge of being the super unrealistic left that, believes in fully automated luxury gay space communism, but it started to move more and more towards the mainstream, especially because it becomes the thing that's most appropriate to address it. If you're watching, as we have been watching, what's taking place in Palestine all day, every day, and you're sitting around feeling powerless, the power that we have consists in our ability to refuse to participate in the system and to refuse to participate in the economy. But because of the role of the Democratic Party, it continues to seem impossible. We decided at a certain point that we were going to just try to call a general strike and see what happened. We in Socialists Without Borders, we're going for it. We're tired of talking about it. It's time this happened. So we decided to go ahead and try to call the general strike. We have members in 3 unions. I'm part of the National Organization of Legal Service Workers. Berta is in the City Workers Union, and Christopher is in the teachers union for the high school teachers in Pacifica. And so we thought we proposed a resolution. We developed the proposal a little bit, and it was really the idea of a general strike and the idea of political frustration becoming actual anger and terror. Like, I work in a public nonprofit, so everybody there is extremely sensitive to everything that Donald Trump says or does. And watching amongst the members of the union, they became increasingly frustrated because the leadership at our nonprofit wasn't saying anything about this stuff. And this is fairly consistent across the board, is that the leadership of these nonprofits, who often could be relied upon to make at least some kind of political statement, anything, we're just not doing it. And this includes the nonprofits that serve immigrants. They said, no, you know what, we're just going to keep doing exactly what we do. We're not going to say anything about this, with the implication, and this was what the executive director of my nonprofit said to me directly, or not to me, someone else in the union directly, was we went to tell her that we were going to take this one-day action. We were all going to go out of work, and we were all going to have a picket line on October 24th from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. at 630 Sansom, where ICE keeps its detention center in town. And our ED said, I think that's a great idea, but could you please just not mention legal assistance to the elderly as part of it? And the logic behind that was she was worried that she was going to lose her funding. And that, the funding for legal assistance to the elderly that's federal, that's directly federal, is about 2%. It's a relatively tiny part of it. But that's not, the response to that is, but the city receives federal money. Yes, the city receives federal money. So because our little shop called a general strike, President Trump is supposedly going to defund the city of San Francisco just to get us for doing this. And these were very real things in people's minds as the campaign developed. I'm getting a little ahead of myself. How am I doing on time? You okay? We drafted a resolution and we adapted it to each of our shops. And Christopher was the first, was our experimental case. He was our guinea pig. And he can tell you more about this himself, but he took the resolution and he took the proposal, and people didn't even read the resolution. As soon as he started talking about ICE and how violent and horrible it was, people started snapping their fingers, and it passed the committee unanimously. But apparently they had no idea of what we were actually talking about, as we would later learn. I had my union meeting the next day, and my union was very vocal about how they brought up this issue with our own administration or executive of our nonprofit. They brought up the fact that people weren't doing this, and they wanted to do something, and they endorsed it unanimously. And I know they didn't know what they were endorsing now, even though I explained it as best I could. Berta took it to her union, and she got a lot of very positive response in her union as well, and she can tell you more about it. But of all the 40 people in her union that were in her department, they all endorsed it unanimously right away, and they wanted to do it, and they took it to their union, and thereby hangs a tale. So the response was very positive. And my particular position was that I started to kind of try to read. There are a number of other shops in San Francisco, so we're just one bargaining unit. I started making connections with people in other bargaining units, where I ran into the other problem that I also attribute to Democratic Party sickness, which is if you're trying to organize a labor activity in a public services nonprofit, everyone there is going to, or to some degree, everyone there is going to feel like their work is so important that if they go out on strike, their clients are going to be irreparably damaged. And that would be like a really extreme emergency situation. In maybe it's more so in other people's shop, but they're unable to because of the specific thing they're addressing in their daily life, they're unable to imagine addressing something more general, stepping out to address something more general.
That's true.
That's true, yeah. So they wanted to rebel, and we started looking for, we came up with ideas. Who do we want to reach out to? We wanted to reach out to the other shops, and we started working on that. We wanted to reach out to other agencies in our building. I don't think the people who really wanted to do that ever actually went and met anyone, but they really wanted to do it. They thought it was a good idea. And we just started trying to organize, and then we started to run into problems. And the energy towards it, the support for it, started to kind of roll back. Christopher had a really funny experience where the president of his union went to the big meeting of all of the presidents of all the locals in that union in the state of California, and people were coming up to her and saying, "Oh, I hear you're going on general strike," and she was like, "What?" Even though she'd been at the meeting and voted for it. So she came back very concerned about what it was, and then started actively working against it. She was even sending me emails about how I wasn't allowed to write the name of their union on anything. So that process was a very painful process. It took a couple of months, and then they eventually reversed their endorsement. The same thing happened in my union. there was a lot of energy and support for it, and it never wavered. Everyone always wanted to do it. There was never any serious talk about withdrawing the endorsement. But what it did come down to was a vote over whether or not they would represent themselves as members of the Union from Legal Assistance to the Elderly. They're also worried that the person who is the organizer of our union, the local organizer, was actually pretty politically clear about what we were doing, and they also were into it, and they also said, but you're not going to get support from the union, and if you get in trouble, they might not send a lawyer or send any money to support you. So people really took that to heart. Like, I don't know what they think UAW is doing for us. I've never seen anybody from UAW in our shop. I've never heard anything from UAW directly addressed to my shop. But people became very worried that we were going to annoy the leadership of the UAW, and there would be some kind of extreme consequences for that. They had no idea of just how little UAW does not care about our shop in the slightest. And this is a fear that continues to go on. But the person who was our organizer was actually very supportive and helped me with improving some of the materials that we had, and helped me with contacting some people in other bargaining units in our local. But the thing started coming up too late. I think we had the idea in the end of August or in the middle of August, and we were doing it at the end of October, which is a long time, which is a very short period to try to get everybody out. Actually to, leave their jobs to protest ICE for one day. So because of this retreat within the unions, we made a pivot and started looking at other community organizations that were interested in similar kind of work. And we met a lot of very there were the activists that we've known for a long time in the neighborhood who joined up with us pretty enthusiastically and brought all kinds of resources to the event. And then we met some new organizations, especially the people who have been organizing the regular demonstrations at 100 Montgomery against ICE. And we were able to unite with them around a program that called for an end to the deportations, for the abolition of ICE, for the ICE to get out of the courts, and for papers for all. Yes, thank you, Berta. And they really, we ended up not having a lot of people show up on the day, but the people who showed up on the day were very high quality. It was like the mission had come down to 630 Montgomery Street with the Aztec dancers and people standing in line waiting to have their papers checked. And we marched around the building for 4 hours and sang some songs, did some theater. And it was a very positive experience for the people who showed up. And we do have a little organization that's coming out of it. I think like the lessons of it is something that I had been told many times, but I didn't really consider, or I didn't until I had the experience of it. I didn't really understand it, which is that it's not a good idea to try to do radical left work in a union as an individual activist. That was, I'm fortunate that my shop was very small. I'm fortunate that whatever goodwill I have with my colleagues is what it is due to working with them every day. But I didn't have enough support who were clear on the same program to help me resist that tide of reaction to what came up. The other thing is that maybe it does look a little bit silly from the outside to be an organization of 4 people calling for a general strike in the United States. If I had thought that before I did it, I wouldn't have even tried it, and maybe that's why I hadn't tried it until now. But But I just stuck with, we're really going to see the general strike. That's really what we're organizing here. So as we reconfigure to move forward, and also I learned more about the authority within the labor movement for doing an actual general strike, that it is illegal, that they'll never do it, that you're working against the authority of labor, that you're of the labor bureaucracy, you're working against the authority of the Democratic Party, which is the authority of the entire bipartisan system, in order to do this kind of labor action. Yeah, it's like it's a problem that is almost too big to comprehend. So as we're going forward, the new orientation of the work is going to be more towards, this is a campaign for a general strike. We're already planning another event for May 11th, which should be the day of the Labor Council meeting. Which is that we're all going to go down and picket the Labor Council and hand out leaflets and call on them to call the general strike. That was one of the big gains that I think that hasn't fully dawned on us, is that people in the actual labor bureaucracy in San Francisco and in the state of California had to seriously deal with the issue of whether or not to call a general strike. And they acted like it was still a joke, but we had a really funny experience at the Bay Area Resistance training for how to not resist, or there was the nonviolent resistance training in Oakland. It was a very big event organized by the Labor Council and by Bay Area Resistance and the people that are around that. And first, they invited us to have a speaker, and then they changed their minds and said that we couldn't have a speaker. So we went there and we leafleted the whole thing like crazy. There were a couple thousand people there, and and eventually they got up, the members of the Labor Council got up on stage and said, we will never, ever, ever call a general strike. It's too unrealistic. It will take too long to organize. The only conditions under which we would call a general strike is if Donald Trump sent the National Guard to invade San Francisco. Just a couple weeks later, and they didn't call the general strike.
And did people clap like when they said this? Like, we'll never let it.
Someone else will have to address that. And so that is, to me, that's very important, that the members of this bureaucracy were troubled enough about this notion that they actually had to turn and pay attention to what we're saying, and we're not giving up.
So I think obviously the lessons of actual struggle to support the idea of a general strike are very important to fight for a general strike. You don't know until you start fighting for it what the reaction is going to be. So this coming Monday and Tuesday, 63,000 workers are going to be going on strike at the University of California. This attack on public workers, on healthcare workers, is going to be is a monumental struggle, because there's union busting at the university, and the question of whether or not we're going to have health care, whether or not we can have public education, are in a real question for the working class. And joining us is Lisa Milos, who is a now retired member of Union of Professional and Technical Employees, which is affiliated to the CWA, my union. I'm affiliated to that as well, who has been fighting in that local for Palestine and for a general strike. So welcome, Lisa.
What Abel was mentioning, I'm part of the hard-headed group of people, and we are calling for a general strike on November 28th. Or rather, we are joining the international call for a strike by the Italian dock workers, November 28th and November 29th. And we're going to be supporting that at the headquarters of the ILWU, 1188 Franklin Street, asking the ILWU and the ILA and the AFL-CIO, which is also their headquarters over there, to start calling for a general strike. Now, I'm a retired member of UPTE, University of Professional and Technical Employees. I was a medical interpreter at UCSF for 18 years. I was there. We brought in all the medical interpreters from the state of California, from UC, into UPTE in 2009. And And since that moment on, I was very active in all the different strikes. Right now, there's a strike that was called for the 17th and the 18th, and UC and UPD was scheduled to be part of that strike, which would have brought the number to be 89,000 UC workers striking on that day, together with AFSCME workers and also CNA. And apparently CNA is doing this as a solidarity strike, so the Taft-Hartley Act might not apply in their case. I think the Taft-Hartley Act applies to federal workers, right, if I'm not mistaken. And
No, all workers.
all workers,
Yeah.
really?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, in any event, CNA has stated that there is a solidarity strike, and they are doing it for patient care. And but UPD in particular, the problem is not only the Democratic Party. Let's just state that. The problem is also within the left in this city and in this country. My experiences after having been a delegate at the San Francisco Labor Council, for example, in 2021, my union at the time, the leadership had passed a resolution for Palestine, which included breaking ties with Histadrut. And Histadrut is the Israeli Labor Federation that supports apartheid, helped establish apartheid, and is also, at this time, funding the IDF reservists with money and from the paycheck of every Israeli worker. So they are participating actively in genocide. Back in 2021, our resolution including breaking ties with Histadrut, because that has been the ask of the Palestinian General Federation of Trade Unions for a long time, because that is an institution that has supported apartheid from the beginning of the Israeli state, even before the Israeli state was formed, with the help of the American Federation of Labor at the time. As a Chilean American, I'm also very, very highly aware of the role that the AFL-CIO and U.S. labor in particular has played in interventionist policies and being the right arm of U.S. intervention foreign policy for quite some time, like they did when they participated and they instigated and they supported the overthrow of the Allende government by creating a destabilization campaign against Allende. Through the American Institute of Free Labor Development, and then subsequently became the Solidarity Center, which has continued in that course, together with working with what's called the U.S. aid as well. And the reason I'm bringing all that up now is because there are certain experiences that have been going on for quite some time, which many workers in the United States have not been aware of. One of those experiences, for example, was something that happened recently at the Communication Workers of America convention in August. Now, I, as a member of UPD, attempted to be elected as a delegate, and my union, which has 22,000 members and technically could have had at least 30 delegates allotted according to CWA Constitution, they decided to only have 4 elected delegates, 4 out of 22,000. And of course, me and another person from UPD Members for Palestine were in the 5th and 6th place, and we were not even allowed to be alternates. Well, there's a longer story to tell with regard to this that goes back to this past, when October 7th came around, and there was a demonstration planned at the San Francisco General Hospital, for example, by this group that was formed, which was an affinity group, which was healthcare workers for Palestine. And the idea was to bring forth the participation of unions, because it said healthcare workers for Palestine. However, it behaved more of an affinity group, and we wanted to get the participation of the actual chapter president of SEIU 1021 into this rally that was held at General Hospital. And at the beginning, they said yes, and then they said no, and I had to fight internally to say, you know what, we're doing a demonstration there. We are healthcare workers for Palestine. How could you rescind any kind of invitation when I've already invited them when you said yes? And this does not seem possible. To me, it did not cross my mind that that could happen. Finally, they said, oh, you're right, we should. And then we had the honor of having Brenda Barros, somebody from SEIU 1021 also, with Cheryl. And from that day forward, though, it has been an uphill battle. And in my union in particular, UPTI, even after having passed a resolution in support of Palestine, the new leadership completely scrubbed that resolution in 2021. And they decided to, quote unquote, prioritize bargaining, contract bargaining over Palestine. Even after 2023, October 2023 came out, even after the Israeli doctors had urged Israel to bomb hospitals, 100 Israeli doctors, even after there was demonstrations, even after doctors and nurses, and now more than about 2,000 healthcare workers have been killed, and 500 of them right now are detained, including many prominent doctors. Even after all of this time, these past 2 years of openly live-streamed genocide, we have a union leadership that refuses to address the issue of Palestine. Now, when I'm saying that the problem is also within the left, it's because as a member of the San Francisco Labor Council, when we tried to present a resolution back in 2021 to the San Francisco Labor Council, it was put in committee. And at the time, the United Educators of San Francisco leadership changed, the executive committee changed, and there was more left-wing participation in the executive committee. However, they did not swear in their new members until August. And even though those 30 of us who had been who were delegates to the San Francisco Labor Council and who had been presented this resolution, asked them to come on earlier, they decided not to, and they came later. And then we were having a lot of, we were not able to pass that resolution because in September, the AFL-CIO sent a letter to the San Francisco Labor Council saying that that resolution, we couldn't have any discussion regarding Palestine, that was not a decision that the labor councils could address, that only the headquarters of the AFL-CIO could address.
Liz Schuler.
Liz Schuler, correct. And subsequently to that, even while I was continuing to be a delegate, there was other resolutions that were passed, like by the CFA, which supported Dr. Rabab Al-Duhadi from being terminated when she was attacked by the San Francisco State University administration. So in that case, there was support by the members of the Labor Council, but in terms of actually supporting international struggles and Palestine, and 3 more minutes? Yeah. You gave him a lot more time. What's up with that?
They had a general strike.
Okay. But actually, we should talk about the problems and the reasons why we're not having general strikes. That's the whole idea, That's basic. Yeah, I'm asking for more time. I'm sorry, but this is not acceptable. Sorry about that, but no. So our union decided to bring things to the forefront now. Our union decided to accept the tentative agreement, and they pulled back from this joint strike at University of California. And I was looking at the tentative agreement, and basically it's 1%, 2% raises, maybe 3%, and they're claiming it as victories when in reality it's really not addressing the whole issue of equity. They're also, it's a very unique opportunity to do joint strikes with the other UC unions, because normally UC finds a way of making sure that the contracts do not coincide, the expiration of the contracts do not coincide, and this would be a time when they would all be coinciding. And unfortunately, UPTI has been repeatedly, even under the previous leadership, repeatedly been ignoring or not really fulfilling the joint compromises of working together with the other unions in terms of organizing together. So even the thought of a general strike is completely, even for striking for their own issues, they pull back and did a tentative agreement. Now, the issue that happened at the CWA convention is something that needs to be brought to the forefront. In August, there was resolutions were brought to Healthcare for All resolution was brought to the News Guild, and even though it passed in the News Guild, the leadership of the News Guild didn't even bring that up to the floor. And the group called CWA for Palestine had presented resolutions, but they never presented it at their own different locals. And that group deliberately marginalized those of us who had been critical of CWA and listened instead to criticisms from the leadership about those individuals, like you were saying, when you're struggling individually, and instead marginalized us and did not even allow their resolutions to go forward. And instead, the resolution that did go forward was a very harmful one. It was a resolution that quoted international, quote unquote, international solidarity, but it was in support of U.S. aid. And also part of the resolution that was proposed there in that same one was for the two-state solution, which the majority of people that have been struggling for Palestine for a long, long time, including many Palestinian organizations and unions, feel that even the concept of a two-state solution at this point in juncture is moot, because there's no contiguous territory upon which a two-state solution could even be created, because there's been separated into bantustans, and that the only way that civil society and unions in particular, if we believe in equality under the law and equal representation and anti-discrimination, the only way that we could actually support something would be a one-state solution with equality for all and a right to return, which is something that has moved forward in human rights issues and in all the different ways, in terms of how blatant this unequal and treatment, especially since the Israeli state declared itself a Jewish state in 2018, which deliberately puts them as a supremacist state. Now, at the CWA convention, we brought those different posters up, and we talked with people, and we organized an event there, 2 events actually, and we passed out flyers. But the CWA for Palestine members did not push it onto the floor. They were discouraged from doing so. And instead, the resolution that came forward was that international solidarity one, which is really a step back from what we anti-imperialist and anti-Zionist and anti-capitalist people and organizations believe in. UPTI Members for Palestine is a very small group, and unfortunately, we have not been able to get more support among our members because of this level of control by the leadership. Out of all of the different strikes that we've been at, we have been supporting the strikes, and we've gone there with material, and we've gone there with tables. We've set up tables, and we've talked to people. We've created teach-in situations, short teach-in situations where during the lunchtime to not interrupt the speakers. And even so, we've been continuously marginalized. So yeah, there is something to say about being an individual doing work pro-Palestine work, but there is really important to do it, because if you don't do it, who will? Number one. And if you don't bring it up, nobody can say, well, I didn't know. And to tie it in, one last thing, to tie it in with the immigrant rights issue. The immigrant rights community in San Francisco in particular apparently also had the presence of Scott Wiener at one of the meetings. And I approached Scott Wiener. He's a Zionist. He's one of the people who was able to get Dr. Rupa Myra fired for speaking up about Palestine from UCSF. He's a Zionist, but he's pretending to be friends of immigrants. As the typical, duplicitous nature of the Democratic Party is. And now he's running for Nancy Pelosi's seat. So it's very important to tie these two issues together. Why? It's not only because of Scott Wiener, but because the Israeli software that is being used by called Elbit Systems and other systems that is Israeli software has been used to track immigrants across the border and to track immigrants here, as well as to track the more than 270 journalists that were killed in Gaza. It's basically tracking software through cell phones where they've been using to attack not only the journalists when they're in the field, but they track them back home to kill them in their homes with the rest of their families. And that software is called Where's Daddy? It's part of the Palantir, which is located here in Palo Alto. And CWA, the reason why it's very important to consider and to have gone to the CWA convention and to work with the CWA and try to get the CWA on board is because it's made up of News Guild journalists who, during 2 years of genocide, have still refused to create any kind of campaign to support the journalists that have been killed in Gaza. The only ones that have been doing it here in the United States have been the National Writers Union. There's also tech workers in CWA. There's also telecom workers, and who their counterparts in Gaza have been keeping Gaza connected to the rest of the world when the towers are down, so that they can continue communicating via internet. And of course, the CWA has health workers. UPD members, 22,000 of them, form the largest public health and education sector of CWA. So that's why it's continuing to be important to continue to do the work and to show as well the connection between the Israeli forces, and especially with regard to the ICE and the repression that's been going on in the United States. Many of these law enforcement agencies have been trained by Israel, according to a report that was put out more than 5 years ago by Jewish Voice for Peace called Deadly Exchange. The majority of our police forces have been trained by Israel and using weapons that are battle-tested in Palestine for crowd control, including the ones for sound and then the smelly, the skunky material that was recently used also at UCLA campus against Palestinians by an IDF member who was on campus in UCLA. And the issue of free speech within our unions, we can't even get our unions to support us when we speak up. And that's why I had to retire, because I was threatened with being fired for wearing a keffiyeh, and I was put underneath an investigatory meeting by the Office of Ethics and Compliance for so-called harassing a doctor. When I didn't harass him, he's the one that told me he wouldn't work with me if I wore a keffiyeh, and I refused to take it off. So I was threatened with being fired, and I couldn't even trust my union to defend me with the issues of free speech. And the way that the civil rights laws have been criminalized, have been weaponized against free speech in the United States, we're going in the direction of the UK, where people are being sentenced to 10 years for speaking up for Palestine, just for holding a sign. So if this isn't fascism, I don't know what is, honestly. I lived in Chile during the last 3 years of the dictatorship, not the first, but during the last 3 years of the dictatorship. And there's this, one of the things that you notice right off the bat is this level of self-censorship, how people end up self-censoring them, you know, and the level of, also the level of complicity that happens within these political parties, where general strikes, even strikes or labor law has been completely eroded to such an extent that they end up meaning really nothing. So I think we need to wake up and continue to fight that fight, and whether or not we are one person, two people, three people, four people, we have to speak, because if we don't, who will? Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. And, you know, obviously, a united strike of all the UC workers would have had a powerful effect of shutting down the university. And another issue is Gavin Newsom, who's now running for president, is on the Board of Regents and has been supporting the union busting. They spend millions of dollars for lawyers to fight the union. So the other speaker we're going to have, another speaker, is with SEIU 1021. And for those who don't know, SEIU is the largest union in California. It has over 750,000 members. That union could organize a general strike. That union could organize a labor party. And in San Francisco, that union has 17,000 members, and it's under an attack, privatization, an attack to lay off the workers, and also to privatize the public services in San Francisco. And Cheryl Thornton is with the community services. She's been the chapter chair, and they refused to have even an election in that chapter. The union bureaucrat who's responsible for that chapter is having elections other places, but not for her chapter. So this is part of the systemic problem we have in our unions as far as democracy and membership control. So welcome, Cheryl Thornton.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Steve. Hi, Lisa. Oh, no, I'm good. Yeah, so I'm a worker for, I'm a rank and file member for SEIU 10-1. And I'll start with, there's been a long struggle in the city and county with the workers. And it started with me as a Black worker. And the event that Lisa was referencing, it was our first annual Black May Day that we had at General Hospital. And we organized it, and UPT was having their own strike that day, and they came and joined in with us, which was good because we got a chance to organize together. SEIU 10-1 did not support this Black May Day. And we wanted them to support it because then that would have been an opportunity to organize with the UC workers at General Hospital to strengthen and unify all of us together. But they didn't do that. The problem for SEIU 10-1, it's the largest union, as Steve said, in California, but it is a business union. And it's not interested in educating the workers and uniting them. We all have our struggles, but we should all be able to unite on these struggles. But the union, like my union, they fail to organize to educate the workers. So they don't even understand the whole organization and how it works. And sometimes they think, because it's a business union, meaning that they put wages and working conditions over political action, when we need to have both political action and better working conditions. Because in the political action, it unifies all of us, because we're all in the same struggle. But for some reason, they don't want to do that. And it's because they're in the pockets of the billionaires to some extent. They say they're not, but they are, because they want to control us. And one thing I have found in SEIU is that many of our membership dollars go to the Democratic Party. This is how they fund that Democratic Party. And yet, they're not hearing who we are and what we need. We need better housing. We need affordable health care. We need safe neighborhoods. We need good schools. We need and good jobs to build strong communities. But what is happening is that our money goes to Washington DC through our unions, and because they want to control the narrative, we're under this business union, and so people aren't educated about the union. So they don't even know like what the president and the e-board does versus the union rep. And so there's so much confusion is what I'm seeing. And so people, what happens? They become disillusioned. They may not get out of the union. They may get out of the union, but they just don't really engage. And so, you know, San Francisco used to be a union town, a working class city. And they pushed the working class out. And the unions didn't organize. And they're still not organizing. We all need to join together. Like I said, we're all in this fight together. And as far as my union, I have not really seen a strong, organized campaign outside of Proposition 50 about how we're going to organize a general strike to push back against this fascist government. I don't see it at all happening. I see people being distracted by all these agents and activities that they're sending from the federal government. I don't see even our mayor. He says, okay, that this is a sanctuary city. He says it's a city for all, but people are under attack. They're under attack. I work in public health. I work in the Tenderloin. I see it. And I think, so I think that a lot of grassroots organizations are trying to reach the people that are here on the ground to organize the people together so that we can bond together and say enough is enough. We're not taking anymore. I mean, look at, they said today I was reading, the price of groceries since 2020 are up 45%. How much of this can we take? How much? Pretty soon, people are not even going to be able to stay in their houses because they're not going to be able to afford to heat them. They're not going to be able to afford to get food. That's another thing. Food deserts are going everywhere. Supermarkets are shutting down and access to food, and yet there's no response. I don't see, like, again, we're the largest union, and I don't see any really strong concerted effort to organize with the community, with the working class people of San Francisco to say, and to California to say, we're going to shut California down. And then maybe from there, the other people will join in the other states. I think that that's what happened when the general strike happened previously. So I think, I think that that's pretty much what I have to say.
The issue of this meeting, a general strike, is appropriate. That's the period that we're in. And one of the interesting things in the union movement is that union officials sometimes talk about fascism. Fascist at our union meeting. And one person even said, maybe we should have a general strike. One delegate. But the fact of the matter is, the union, no, it's fine. The union is not educating the members about what fascism is, what the history of fascism is. If you say that you're threatened with fascism, you better examine what happened when we had fascism in Germany, in Italy. They don't want that education. Why? Why don't they want that education? Because they are relying on the Democrats to solve this crisis, the midterms to solve this crisis. In fact, I went up to my international president, Claude Cummings Jr., and I said, Trump is saying that there's not going to be another election. He's saying that there may be martial law, that we don't need another election. What are we going to do about that? We have to take that seriously. When they say they're going to impose martial law and they say they're going to institute the Insurrection Act and arrest us, workers and others, so you know what he said to me? The Republicans won't allow that. Think about that. The Republicans won't allow that. The Republicans are part of an insurrection in Congress. They're an insurrectionary party. They supported the attempted coup and insurrection. To think that the Republicans are going to stop fascism is very dangerous. But that's what he said, and he's the president of my union. So think about this. We face a fascist government, which is not only attacking people using fascist tactics in ICE, immigrants and others, but they're going to launch a war against Venezuela and bomb Venezuela. The labor movement, the working class, the unions have to use their power to stop this. It's just, these attacks are going to escalate. The military is coming, and they're going to be repressing and arresting not only immigrants, trade unions, and others who go on strike. That's what they want to do. That's what they say they want to do. They say that if you're against fascism, Antifa, you're an enemy. You can be arrested for that. They're saying organizations in Italy and Europe that are against fascism should be arrested. They're criminals. They're criminals. Do people understand what that means? If you're against fascism, you can be arrested for that. This is a fascist government. Now, the question is what to do about it. And that's why the general strike comes up. Because a general strike is a way of not stopping fascism, but putting the fascists on offensive. We have to organize and unite the entire working class. In our unions, we have to say that this is one of the things we can do to fight back. But it means fighting this pro-capitalist union bureaucracy, this pro-imperialist union bureaucracy, a union bureaucracy who thinks the Democrats will save us. And in San Francisco, as everyone knows, the Democrats are not saving us, they're destroying us. The billionaires who run San Francisco now are gentrifying the city, are saying that they want to have more police when people don't have enough to eat. They're saying we need to militarize the city. That's Lurie and the Democratic Party and Scott Wiener. So we have to organize, and also we have to connect to other struggles that are going on. We have to unify the working class. One reason the working class is not unified is because the unions support the Democratic Party. It's a capitalist party. It supports capitalism. How can you unify the working class when you support capitalism? Capitalism is crushing the working class. It's destroying our lives, our housing, our education system. That's what capitalism is doing. So we have to fight business unionism, and I want to say about Mondani and the election, because the election of Mondani showed that people are fed up with capitalism. Mm-hmm. People are fed up with this system, and they want to change. I understand that. And it's a significant thing, and according to the Fox, the communists have taken over New York. Right. Of course, they called Obama a communist too. And this is a tactic of fascists. They call liberals communist. Everybody's a communist. And in a way, it's good because people say, well, communism, anti-communism, everybody's a communist. This is what the fascists are saying. If you're a liberal, you're a communist. So the danger is now is that the military is going to be going into New York. They are going to try to crush Mondani. And unfortunately, Mondani is not prepared, and the people who support him are not prepared for a fascist attack on him. And it's coming. They are going to try to crush Mondani. They may try to kill him, but they're certainly going to bring in the military and shut off all federal funding in New York. They're going to try to crush that movement in New York that brought Mondani to power. And we have to say, what can the working class in New York do about that? They can have a general strike. They can shut down New York. And I agree with Cheryl. We have to expand what happens in California and New York nationwide. The working people of California have the power to shut down the state. The SEIU and the unions have the power to close down California and then say to Trump and the fascists, what are you going to do? What are you going to do when we shut down California? And unfortunately, my sister, Sara Nelson, who's vice president, who's president of the airline flight attendants and in the CWA, has called for a general strike. But what did she say when she was on TV? Did she talk about a general strike? No. Even though the airlines are unsafe, she wouldn't mention the word general strike except at a rally, no King's Day. Why? Because when you start talking about a general strike, that raised the question of a class conflict. It raised the question of fighting capitalism. She is afraid to campaign for a general strike. That's what we have to do. We have to campaign for a general strike, and we have to educate workers, this is why we need a general strike. We are not going to avoid it. As a matter of fact, in my view, Trump and Musk and these fascists are agitating for a general strike. The basis of this trade union bureaucracy that we have today in the United States came about because of a witch hunt in the 50s, in which they kicked out communists, socialists, and militants out of the union. They ran them out, they destroyed them. The ILWU was nearly destroyed. And the fact of the matter is, one of the reasons they were able to do that in that period was that capitalism was growing. Capitalism was actually growing, and they could offer workers homes. They could offer workers cars, auto workers. They could provide something. Now they're telling workers you can't get cars, you can't get homes, and a lot of workers have to live with their families. They can't even move out of their homes. So there's nothing to offer workers. That means the conditions of workers in this country are moving towards a mass mobilization. The conditions for a general strike are growing. So, and with this fascist government, they are agitating people to fight them. They're saying, my way or the highway. They're saying, we're going to destroy you unless you fight us. So we have no choice as a working class, and we have to fight in our unions. We have to tell the truth to workers, which is what we're saying today. We have to tell the truth. They may not want to hear it, especially the union bureaucrats don't want to hear it, but they have to hear the truth. In our union, my union, Pacific Media Workers Guild, and one of the things that happened in my union is that Trump, straight out in the first term, said that journalists were scum. Do you remember that? He called journalists scum? Now, what was the response of the union? You shouldn't do that. That's bad. That's bad to call journalists scum. No, that is what Nazis do. Nazis call journalists scum. This is a serious thing because journalists are killed because of that fascist language. That's what we're talking about. But the union bureaucracy does not want to tell workers, you better prepare for this. That language comes from a political method of fascism. So I think we have to really organize, tell the truth, and continue this fight for a general strike. Continue this fight, in my view, for a Labor Party so that we have a political alternative in this country. A big reason Trump was elected, there was no political alternative. People did not see a political alternative. A lot of people voted for him hoping that he would change things. And that will continue unless we build a working class political alternative. So our last speaker is going to be Ricardo Ortiz, who has been in a general strike in Puerto Rico and is active in the labor movement and building working class solidarity. So welcome, Ricardo.
The country was exploiting in a general strike, and the army was outside, even the Navy occupying, Santo Domingo, which is the capital of the Dominican Republic. Very exciting experience as I landed on the plane. So,
At the right time.
Yeah, so I've been more or less in 5 at least that I remember, not counting some sort of one-day strikes, whatever. I think we should we should talk as workers and oppressed people about the bigger issues, why all these things are happening. And I want to start by saying that I think, and I'm using the model of Marxist economist Michael Roberts, that we are living in a period of prolonged recession, probably entering perhaps pretty soon into a depression. And things are happening, with center similarity that happened in the 30s. We should ask ourselves, are Trump politics just a, matter of one man going mad? Wow, he is the imperialist chief of the most powerful imperialist power on earth? I would say no. I mean, when and I got some information that I want to share with you guys and think about it. Particularly, let me give you an example. When Trump thinks about invading Greenland, and because of the needs of American corporations to obtain minerals that are essential to the United States, his tariffs against Canada. Is this just merely some sort of capricious action. No, I mean, it is that the United States is losing ground as a hegemonic power in relation to other, imperialist powers or other emerging actors. I was showing Comrade Steve Seltzer the other night some information published by the Canadian government. And I, can share this with you guys. If you go to the Canadian government's page that is called Canadian Mining Assets, Natural Resources Canada.ca, Canada says Canada is home to about half of the world publicly listed mining and mineral exploration companies. So what does that mean? And if you continue researching in that resource, you'll see that the U.S. corporations don't have the majority of mineral mining around the world. So this issue of, we want Greenland, tariffs against Canada, is because of these reasons. If you read particularly a recent economic report that an Argentinian group published in their press yesterday, the total foreign direct investment in Latin America is still led by the U.S. But what it has changed is the amount of foreign direct investment in the region by the European Union, Russia, China, which are gaining ground. And, you can analyze, you can take this from recent actions of Trump in Argentina. He gave Milei, a despot, $40 billion of loans. But, one of the things that the press don't cover is that many instances, he have told the Milei government, you got to keep China out of Argentina, So this is what is happening around the world. That war against these military threats of intervention in Venezuela, Venezuela has the largest oil reserves in the world, and the U.S. needs this access. And, they are openly pressuring the Venezuelan government with blockade and with all this armada that they even brought, the most modern and largest aircraft carrier in the American Navy, the USS Gerald Ford. Now, in order to confront war or, scarcity right here, we need to have an organized working class. One of the things that has fascinated me or have made me curious is that even within the American left, there are people that don't want to discuss the general strike. Many things, I don't consider myself from this country, obviously I'm not. You can tell by my accent. But, and I don't understand a lot of things in the USA, let me tell you. Even with all the years that I've been here. But that's one that really cracks me up. You need to understand, political action, and you got to study it, even if you probably in your lifetime might not, be involved with it. It's like if you are in an army and you tell, the high command tell the soldiers, well, let's not learn how to use automatic rifles because probably we will not go to war. Could you imagine? Okay, so within this framework, we know that our, trade union leaders, they are completely embedded to the Democratic Party.
Yes.
And the Democratic Party, yes, it is a problem because it's a political party and it's an organized force. And, and they do co-opt all social movements, unfortunately. And let me put it this way. Let's even think for a moment that right here would have been a big social democratic party. Historically, social democracy has also channelized radical efforts of the working class toward capitalism. Europe has had hundreds of mandamis In Latin America, there has been mandamis. Right here, it is that we are so behind history that this sounds revolutionary. Please, if you're an American listening to me, don't take offense to what I'm saying, but because I don't want to offend anybody. But sometimes I laugh when I hear all these young people in memberships or in organizations like the DSA thinking that Mandami is going to revolutionize the city of New York. This guy ran on a Democratic Party economic platform. And he said that he's going to give all the money that the police has. And he says that he's retaining the chief of police. So are you going to tell me that things are going to be different? No. He is put in there, many sectors of the American bourgeoisie, including 2 billionaires, supported his candidacy. He's there for a purpose, which is channelize the anger of the upcoming economic crisis and the militancy that we expect will come out from, the masses. And, being leftist is not, necessary enough. Actually, in Europe, during May 68, the Communist Party of France did everything they could to stop the general strike. Even there are declassified documents that show that they didn't want the strike. Actually, they didn't even initiate it. And they were crucial for the French capitalists to survive. Actually, the crisis was so big that even de Gaulle's government was thinking about calling French troops from Germany to probably confront, the working class at home. So what do we have to do in order to overcome or make things flowing and going? First of all, like most of you have been doing, waiving fights within your trade unions, and also understanding that, I'm going to quote from Leon Trotsky's transitional program. Even the trade unions have a limit in terms of the nature of the organizations. We need to have a revolutionary leadership, if you could. But also it's the question of creating a workers' party, because we need the instruments to guide the working class toward power. We got to address the political issues. As long as capitalism exists, there will be war. Capitalism as a system establishes that the imperialist countries will always have to go abroad to obtain resources, control areas of influence in the world. And in order to do that, they need, they have the need to go abroad and fight wars. And it's a characteristic of the system that they got to push what, accurately was posed by the first speakers, the long, hard-won victories by the working class. We are living in this period of uncertainty, and another surprise that I have at times is how much American exceptionalism exists within our society. People, it's unbelievable. They don't believe, a lot of people, I'm not saying everybody, that a totalitarian state could be established in the United States, In Germany, before the victory of Hitler, a lot of people were saying, this is not Italy. Well, 1933, Hitler became chancellor. In Spain, 1936, what happened in Germany, in Italy, Spain is not Italy, it's not Spain. Well, got a dictatorship that lasted, almost half a century. So we've seen right now how slowly, let me correct myself. even that it seems like a century of Trump governing, he has been in power only about 11 months. So this is nothing in history. But during this time, we have seen how much, civil liberties have been curtailed. I mean, recently, the Supreme Court said that if the president deems something that is legal, well, it is legal. So practically for Latino people, we have to demonstrate our legality in this country. That Supreme Court decision that recently came out establishes that we can be stopped or profiled, only by the simple fact of speaking Spanish or looking like, somebody is undocumented. How does an undocumented person looks like for these races? There are people that are brown, there are people, immigrants that are white, etc. Let me, somebody tell me. And I want to remind people, I thought at one point in my life to become a lawyer, but I decided ultimately against it. And in my undergrad, I took some law courses, and particularly one was American constitutional law. And there, I always remember the case of Dennis versus the United States, which the Supreme Court, I think it was in 1950 something. Well, it was in 1950 something. While in this period called McCarthyism, that people were brought to be questioned to the Committee of American Activities. The court, when they indicted, Secretary General of the Communist Party, Eugene Dennis, they found out that these people were guilty because their beliefs in communism was a clear and present danger. I mean, that was the doctrine that was applied for that case and, for that period. So are you telling me that they cannot come back with something even wilder than that? Well, I encourage people to wake up because, this is happening right in our faces. The need for the education of general strike is vital. I mean, that's one of the tools that the working class could have. And, we are not saying that people got to be adventurous and start yelling like crazies in the street. No, but we can have educationals like this, talking to workers in the workplace. I mean, in 1990, I participated in a general strike in Puerto Rico. And it had been probably a decade or something that an informal general strike happened. In the year 1974 in Puerto Rico, at the same time, the electrical workers employed by the state, local state electrical energy company, the water resources company, the teachers, firemen, and workers, professors, and administrative workers in the University of Puerto Rico went on strike at the same time. And the governor, Rafael Hernandez Colon, he mobilized the National Guard against all these workers. I was in the theater with my brother, and we came out, and the National Guard was, arriving in our town, and we were coming out of the movie, watching the movie State of Siege by Costa Gavras. So I am like 12 years old, and I grabbed my older brother. What is going on? I was afraid, and it was the strike that happened, and it was a big victory that all these unions did achieve at that time. The government had to recognize the right to organize by the water resources company workers, conceded raises for the teachers, conceded raises for the firemen and other workers. So, that's a case that obviously the use of the word of the general strike did work. In 1998, there was a general strike because, the telephone all telephone services were done at that time by a public telephone corporation. And the governor, who was a member of the U.S. Democratic Party, and the government of Puerto Rico wanted to privatize the company. And eventually they did. But the people, the unions went out for a general strike, and they went for a couple of days. But, they did betray the demands of the workers, the trade union bureaucracy did. So that's another, case how a militant working class gets betrayed by the trade union bureaucracy or the leadership. They promised that ultimately they gave in to the offer of the private corporation that was coming in, that they will retain everybody employed, and actually they fired about 500 workers, so it was not even true that false promise. And the rest of the conditions were going to be kept. But that's an example also that the trade union bureaucracy even can betray and can impose on a militant working class. So we have to be aware of these things. And, last but not least, I would like to point out, in the year, I think it was 99 or 2000, around that time, the whole country did a political general strike against practically the U.S. government, because at that time, the American Navy held bases, 13% of our territory was occupied by the American Navy. And they got this built firing ranges on the island of Vieques, where the NATO, even navies from France, from Britain, along with the American Navy, would do bombing on these sites. And, there were times that they even killed or wounded civilians. So, people, due to one incident that killed a civilian resident, decided to fight, and the struggle went all the way throughout the country. And, the labor bureaucrats, again, with all the contradictions, they even went and set up a camp, within Navy territory. And even John Sweeney flew from the U.S. and visited the labor leaders that were in this encampment. And ultimately, it was decided to have a general strike against the Navy occupation, and people shut down the whole country. And, that example and decision that the people made helped that the Navy would retire from the bombing sites and, close down the Sabana Seca Naval Complex, which was a huge naval radio station on the island. Actually, the base that used to host the headquarters of the Caribbean Naval Complex in Puerto Rico was even bigger in territory than the headquarters of the Atlantic Fleet, which are located in Norfolk. So you can imagine all that military activity that was going on. It was crazy. But that's a triumph, and that's an example that we could follow upon it. If I don't have any doubt whatsoever that the attacks against the workers are going to continue, and I'm not going to take much time because we are running out of time. But I just want to say a couple of things. Steve is right when these bureaucrats, say all these things and do all these things. Because there are even labor bureaucrats that they play golf with their bosses. Yeah. Yes. I mean, talking about Palestine and, the Palestinian issue, many years ago, I was in New York and Boston. I resided in Boston many years ago for a while. Hated that city. So anyways, we went to New York and we were in a picket against a dinner that the FLCIO was having. And we find out that the FLCIO buy Israeli bonds. I don't know if they do it still, but they used to do it. They still do? Yeah, okay. So you see what I'm saying? That's to the point that these bureaucrats go. I'm worse. I'm worse, So, right here, I am also a veteran, and I get all my medical care in the VA. I've been in UCSF. It's no comparison, our care with even UCSF. One time they sent me there, the VA, and I said, no, I'm not coming back. I want to keep here. I don't want to be sent over there. Our facilities are great. No. So the point is that, as you know, Trump has been, firing people, trying to downsize services at the VA. So we have had a few, activities, pickets, organized by the Unionists, Sara. And the president of NFE nationally came to one of the pickets. And he gave a speech calling for voting Democrats. That was his solution. Well, it's no solution. The Democratic Party is the party of war, is the party of capitalism. According to writer Lance Selfa, is the oldest capitalist running party in the world.